Chosen one. What if I told you that while you've been watching the sky for signs, the signal already passed right through your living room? What if the divine alarm you're waiting for isn't coming with sirens and earthquakes, but with the eerie calm of a power grid going silent? What if God's final warning doesn't shout? It stops talking altogether. You felt it, didn't you? That strange stillness in your spirit last week. That moment when everything felt off, like the air itself was holding its breath. You probably dismissed it, called it stress, called it nothing. But nothing in God's kingdom is ever nothing. Here's what they don't want you to understand. The signal isn't coming tomorrow. It isn't coming next month. The signal already moved through the atmosphere, and most missed it because they were looking for noise instead of listening for silence. July 13th isn't a date on your calendar, beloved. It's a frequency, a divine tuning fork that's been vibrating through the spiritual realm, separating those who hear from those who sleep. And the terrifying truth: when that frequency fully activates, when the final wave completes its pass through this dimension, there will be no announcement, no breaking news alert, no countdown, just stillness. The kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl, the kind that makes children stop playing mid-sentence, the kind that makes birds forget how to sing. And in that stillness, chosen one, you'll have exactly 60 seconds to decide. Do you trust what your spirit has been screaming at you for weeks? Or do you wait for CNN to explain what's happening? Because here's the part that's going to shake you. The people who wait for confirmation, they won't get the luxury of time. The moment will pass them by like a whisper in a hurricane. But you who are watching this message right now, you're receiving the intel before the blackout. This isn't coincidence, this is reconnaissance. The trumpet didn't sound with brass and glory. It sounded in the space between your heartbeats, in the pause before your morning prayer, in that split second when you looked up from your phone and felt watched. God doesn't scream his final instructions, beloved. He whispers them to the ones who've learned to listen in the dark. So I'm asking you now, with heaven as my witness, when the stillness comes, when that unnatural quiet settles over your neighborhood like a blanket, when you feel that pull in your chest, telling you to lock your doors and step away from the windows, will you trust it? Or will you be one of the ones standing in their driveway, looking around confused, wondering why everyone else seems to know something? You don't. Comment, "I'm listening, Lord, right now." Not for me, but so heaven sees you're awake. Because the ones who respond to this message, they're the ones receiving the final briefing. The signal already passed. The only question left is, did you catch it? Why did your best friend stop calling you back 3 weeks ago? Why did that promotion you were guaranteed suddenly vanish into thin air? Why does it feel like every door that used to swing open for you is now slamming shut with a sound that echoes through your very soul? Chosen one, listen to me carefully. What you're experiencing isn't bad luck. It isn't karma. It isn't even spiritual warfare. It's extraction. God pulled the plug on your old life, not to punish you, but to position you. While you've been standing there, confused, watching your social circle shrink, your opportunities disappear, and your influence evaporate, heaven has been conducting the most classified operation in spiritual history. You thought you were being rejected. You were being redirected. Remember when Jesus told his disciples in John 16:7, "It is for your good that I am going away." They couldn't understand how his departure could possibly benefit them. They felt abandoned, confused, left behind. But what Jesus knew, what they couldn't see, was that his withdrawal was the only way the Comforter could come. That same principle is operating in your life right now. The isolation you've been feeling, the way conversations die when you enter the room, the strange distance between you and people who used to seek your advice. That's not social awkwardness, beloved. That's divine engineering. God is pulling his chosen ones out of the public eye because what's coming next requires complete spiritual stealth. July 13th isn't a date for demonstrations or declarations. It's not about standing on rooftops proclaiming truth to crowds who won't listen anyway. It's about going underground. Think about Noah. For 120 years, he preached to a generation that mocked him, ignored him, and eventually dismissed him entirely. But when the rains started falling, when the fountains of the great deep burst forth, Noah wasn't standing in the town square trying to convince anyone anymore. He was sealed inside the ark, separated, protected, hidden from the very judgment he had warned them about. That ark wasn't just shelter from the storm, chosen one. It was isolation from the masses. You feel it happening to you right now, don't you? The way your voice carries less weight in rooms where you used to command attention. The way your opinions are questioned by people who used to hang on your every word. The way invitations have stopped coming, opportunities have dried up, and influence has slipped through your fingers like sand. Stop fighting it. Jeremiah 15:19 says, "If you return to me, I will restore you, that you may serve me. If you utter worthy, not worthless words, you will be my spokesman. Let this people turn to you, but you must not turn to them." Did you catch that? You must not turn to them. God is pulling you away from the crowd because the crowd is about to face something they're not prepared for. And your job isn't to save them from what's coming. Your job is to survive it so you can lead them through what comes after. This is why your prayers feel different lately, why your worship has become more intimate, more desperate, more real. You're not praying to an audience anymore. You're not performing spirituality for social media or church approval. You're communing with the only voice that matters. The stage lights have been dimmed, beloved. The spotlight that used to follow you everywhere has been deliberately shut off, not because you failed, but because God's next move requires you to operate in complete darkness. Think about it. When special forces conduct their most critical missions, do they announce their location? When Navy SEALs prepare for extraction, do they send out press releases? When elite units are deployed for classified operations, do they live stream their coordinates? Absolutely not. They go dark. They disappear. They become invisible to everyone except their commanding officer. That's exactly what's happening to you. Heaven has gone into stealth mode, and so must you. The withdrawal you're experiencing isn't rejection, it's reconnaissance. God is repositioning his most trusted operatives for a mission so sensitive, so critical that it requires complete separation from civilian populations. You're not losing your purpose, you're entering your most important assignment yet. But here's what's going to determine your survival in the next phase: your willingness to embrace the darkness instead of fighting your way back to the light that everyone else can see. Because the light they're following, it's about to burn out. And when it does, the only ones left standing will be those who learn to navigate by the light that never dims, the one that shines brightest in complete isolation. If this feels like your life is turning dark, comment, "I'm stepping back right now." That's not surrender, that's obedience to classified orders from the highest command. The extraction has begun. The only question is, will you resist the pull, or will you let God position you where he needs you most? They called you the strong one, the reliable one, the one who never breaks down because you're too busy holding everyone else together. But tell me something, beloved, when was the last time someone asked you how much it was costing your soul to be their foundation? When was the last time someone noticed that while you were keeping their world from crumbling, yours was quietly collapsing piece by piece? When was the last time you were allowed to fall apart? You've been the pillar, haven't you, for your family, your church, your workplace, your community. Everyone leans on you because they know you'll never let them down. They sleep peacefully at night because they know you're awake, carrying burdens that would crush lesser spirits. They move forward confidently because they trust that you'll always be there, solid as granite, immovable as the mountains. But here's what they don't see. Pillars don't just hold up buildings. They also hold up the weight of everything above them. And that weight, beloved, that crushing, relentless, never-ending weight, has been slowly grinding you into dust. You feel it, don't you? The exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. The loneliness that crowds can't cure. The ache in your chest that no amount of prayer seems to heal because you're too busy praying for everyone else's breakthrough to ask for your own. How long have you been running on empty, telling yourself it's faith? Isaiah 40:31 promises that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. But what happens when the eagle's wings are clipped by the very people who claim to love them? What happens when the runner is shackled by the weight of everyone else's burdens? What happens when the strong one finally admits they're dying inside God? Sees it all, beloved. Every midnight tear you've swallowed, every scream you've silenced, every time you've smiled through your own heartbreak to comfort someone else's pain. He's counted every sacrifice you made that went unnoticed, every boundary you destroyed to keep the peace, every piece of your soul you gave away until you barely recognized yourself in the mirror. And now, in His infinite mercy, He's saying something that might shock you: disappear. Not because you failed, not because you're weak, not because you're being punished for finally reaching your breaking point, because what's coming next requires your complete restoration. Think about Elijah. This was a man who called down fire from heaven, who outran chariots, who stood against 450 prophets of Baal and won. But in 1 Kings 19, we find him under a broom tree, so exhausted, so depleted, so utterly broken, that he begged God to let him die. What did God do? Did He lecture Elijah about faith? Did He remind him of his calling? Did He tell him to get back out there and keep fighting? No, He let him sleep. God fed him, rested him, spoke to him, not in the earthquake or the fire, but in a gentle whisper. And then, and only then, did He give Elijah his next assignment. That's what's happening to you right now. God is pulling you away from the noise, the demands, the endless cycle of giving until you have nothing left to give. He's calling you into the cave of restoration because He knows something you've forgotten. You can't pour from an empty vessel. The world told you that disappearing means quitting, that stepping back means giving up, that setting boundaries means you don't care. But God is telling you something different. He's whispering to your wounded spirit, the pillar must collapse quietly or the whole house will fall violently. Your strategic withdrawal isn't abandonment, it's preservation. You see, beloved, there's a difference between running away and being called away. Running away is what we do when we're overwhelmed by circumstances. Being called away is what happens when God has something so important, so critical, so essential for our future that it requires complete separation from our present. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he was ready to lead. David hid in caves before he was crowned king. Jesus Himself withdrew from the crowds when the weight of their needs threatened to consume Him before His ultimate purpose could be fulfilled. They weren't running from their destiny, they were preparing for it. Luke 5:16 tells us that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. The Son of God, the healer of nations, the hope of the world, regularly disappeared from public view. If He needed solitude to maintain His connection with the Father, what makes you think you can operate on empty for years without consequences? But here's what's going to break your heart and heal it at the same time. God isn't just protecting you by pulling you away. He's protecting everyone who depends on you. Because when a pillar collapses from exhaustion, it takes everything with it. How many families have been destroyed because the strong one finally snapped? How many ministries have crumbled because the leader never learned to rest? How many communities have fallen apart because their foundation was built on someone who was slowly disintegrating under the pressure? God loves them too much to let that happen, and He loves you too much to let you destroy yourself trying to hold up what He never asked you to carry alone. Your disappearance isn't the end of your story, beloved. It's not even the end of your ministry to others. It's the beginning of your ministry to yourself. For the first time in years, maybe decades, you're being given permission to focus on your own healing, to address your own pain, to ask for your own breakthrough, to pray for your own restoration instead of spending every prayer request on someone else's need. The guilt you feel about stepping back, that's not conviction, that's conditioning. You've been programmed to believe that your worth is tied to your availability, that your value comes from your service, that your identity is wrapped up in being indispensable. But God is calling you dispensable from man's system so you can become essential to His plan. What if your exit from their chaos isn't failure but preservation? What if your silence isn't selfishness but strategy? What if your disappearance isn't weakness but the wisest thing you've ever done? What if the very people who called you crazy for stepping back will one day thank God that you had the courage to save yourself when no one else would? If you've ever felt the overwhelming urge to just disappear, to vanish from everyone's expectations and demands, you're not losing your mind. You're hearing God's voice. Comment, God, I heard you right now, not as surrender, but as sacred acknowledgement that your season of carrying everyone else is ending and your season of restoration is beginning. The pillar is about to be rebuilt, but first, beloved, it must be allowed to rest. And that rebuilding, that restoration, that's what will prepare you for what's coming next. They're already starting to whisper, aren't they? Your friends, your family, maybe even your pastor. What happened to them? They used to be so involved, so passionate, so present. Now they just disappeared. They'll say you gave up. They'll say you lost your fire. They'll say you turned your back on everything you once stood for. Let them talk. Because what they don't understand, what they can't see, is that you're not retreating from the battlefield. You're transporting the most sacred cargo in spiritual history through enemy territory. And when God assigns you to carry the ark of His presence, He doesn't ask for a public parade. He demands absolute stealth. You feel the weight of their judgment, don't you? The raised eyebrows when you decline invitations, the concerned phone calls when you miss another gathering, the passive-aggressive comments about how some people just can't handle the pressure. But here's what I need you to understand, chosen one. Their confusion isn't condemnation of your character. It's confirmation of your calling. When the Israelites were tasked with moving the Ark of the Covenant in 2 Samuel 6, they learned a brutal lesson about the difference between religious enthusiasm and sacred reverence. Uzzah, with the best of intentions, reached out to steady the ark when it looked like it might fall. His touch was immediate. His death was instant. The sacred doesn't need your protection. It needs your obedience. The crowd wanted to parade the ark through the streets, to make a spectacle of God's presence, to turn divine movement into public entertainment. But God had specific instructions about how His presence was to be transported, covered, concealed, carried only by the consecrated. That's exactly what's happening to you right now. The Spirit of God within you has become too sacred, too powerful, too dangerous to be exposed to casual observers. You're not just carrying your own destiny anymore, beloved. You're carrying the blueprints for the next era, the codes for the coming kingdom, the frequency that will restore what's been broken. And that kind of cargo doesn't travel first class. It travels hidden. Think about Mary, pregnant with the Messiah. Do you think she announced her condition to the neighbors? Do you think she held a gender reveal party for the Son of God? No. She wrapped herself in the silence of sacred secrecy, understanding that what she carried was too precious for public consumption. The world wasn't ready for what she was delivering. Neither is the world ready for what you're carrying. But the resistance you're feeling from others, the criticism, the concern, the outright hostility, when you step back from their expectations, that's not just human nature. That's spiritual warfare. The enemy knows what you're transporting. He can sense the shift in your frequency, the change in your spiritual DNA. And he's using every voice in your circle to convince you to abort the mission, to set down the cargo, to return to being the person everyone expected you to be. But you can't go back, because you're not the same person who agreed to carry this load. 1 Corinthians 4:9 says, "It seems to me that God has put us apostles on display at the end of the procession like those condemned to die in the arena." The very calling that marks you as chosen also marks you as a target. The same anointing that qualifies you for the mission also disqualifies you from the crowd. Being misunderstood isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're moving. When Noah built the ark, his neighbors didn't throw him a farewell party. They mocked him, ridiculed him, called him crazy for building a boat in the desert. But when the rain started falling, when the fountains of the great deep burst forth, who was the coward? Then the one who obeyed the invisible instruction, or the ones who trusted what they could see. You're going to lose people, beloved, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something they can't understand. Some will walk away quietly, others will stage interventions. A few will even declare you deceived, backslidden, or mentally unstable. Let them leave, because the ark was never meant to be carried by committee. It was never designed for group transportation. When God moves his presence from one location to another, he doesn't conduct surveys or hold town hall meetings. He selects his carriers and trusts them to obey. Remember David when he brought the ark to Jerusalem? His wife Michal watched from the window as he danced with abandonment, celebrating the return of God's presence to the holy city. She was embarrassed by his public display, ashamed of his undignified worship, and God shut her womb forever. The very people who should be celebrating your obedience will be the ones critiquing your methods. The ones who should be covering you in prayer will be covering you in gossip. Those who should be encouraging your journey will be questioning your destination. That's not friendship, that's friction. And friction always occurs when something sacred moves through something secular. But here's what I need you to burn into your spirit. Their misunderstanding is not your responsibility. Their comfort is not your calling. Their approval is not required for your assignment. You answer to a higher authority. Jesus himself faced this. In John 6, after he fed the $5,000, the crowds wanted to make him king. They wanted to parade him through the streets, to crown him with their expectations, to turn his ministry into their movement. But he withdrew to the mountain alone. Why? Because popularity is the enemy of purpose. Because crowds kill calling, because what he was carrying was too important to be corrupted by public opinion. The disciples didn't understand. They questioned his strategy. They wondered why he would walk away from such overwhelming support. But Jesus knew something they didn't. Acceptance by the masses is often rejection by the Father. You're not running away from your destiny, chosen one. You're running toward it. You're not abandoning your mission. You're entering the most critical phase of it, because the ark doesn't need an audience. It needs a destination. And that destination, it's not where everyone else is going. It's not where the crowd is headed. It's not even where logic says you should be. It's where the voice of God is calling you. So when they call you coward, when they question your commitment, when they wonder what happened to the person you used to be, remember this: Moses was called crazy for 40 years in the wilderness. Noah was called delusional for building a boat without rain. David was called unstable for dancing before the ark. But history vindicated their obedience, and history will vindicate yours if you're walking away from everything that made you visible to everyone else, if you're carrying something sacred that the world can't see, if you're obeying instructions that don't make sense to human logic. Comment, "I carry the ark," right now. Because that's not just a declaration. That's a sacred oath that you'll protect what God has entrusted to you, regardless of who understands it. The cargo you're carrying will reshape the world. But first, it must be transported safely through the wilderness of human opinion. And that job, beloved, belongs to you alone. Do you remember being 8 years old, standing at the edge of the playground, watching the other kids form their circles while you stood alone by the fence? Do you remember the birthday parties you weren't invited to, the conversations that stopped when you walked into the room, the way your own family seemed to speak a language you couldn't quite understand? You thought something was wrong with you. But what if I told you that even then, especially then, heaven was already marking you as different? What if those lonely lunch tables, those silent weekends, those tears you cried into your pillow weren't signs of rejection, but signs of selection? What if the loneliness you've resented your entire life was actually the oil that's about to anoint you for something the crowd could never comprehend? Chosen one, that pain you've carried since childhood, that deep, aching sense of not belonging anywhere, not fitting into any group, not being understood by anyone, that wasn't abandonment. That was initiation. You see, beloved, there's a difference between being left out and being set apart. The world taught you they were the same thing. They convinced you that isolation meant something was defective about you, that solitude was punishment for some invisible flaw in your character. But heaven sees it differently. In 1 Kings 17, Elijah wasn't sent to minister to the masses. He was sent to a brook called Cherith, where ravens, unclean birds, outcasts of the sky, brought him food twice a day. God could have provided for him in the temple, surrounded by worshipers and fellow prophets. Instead, he sent him to the wilderness, not to punish him, to prepare him. Because the brook wasn't just Elijah's hiding place. It was his classroom. It was where he learned to hear God's voice without the interference of human opinion. It was where he discovered that divine provision doesn't always come through conventional channels. It was where he was initiated into a level of faith that the crowd would never understand. Think about your own brook, beloved. Those years when you ate lunch alone, when you worked late while others went to happy hour, when you spent Friday nights at home while the world was out socializing. You called it loneliness. God called it consecration. Because what was happening to you in those moments of solitude wasn't social rejection. It was spiritual preparation. Every tear you shed in private was washing away the need for public approval. Every night you spent alone was teaching you to find your identity in heaven's voice rather than human validation. You weren't being overlooked. You were being overseen. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you before you were born. I set you apart." Set apart, not set aside, not set back, set apart. The Hebrew word for set apart is kadosh. It means to be consecrated, sanctified, made holy for a specific purpose. It's the same word used to describe the temple vessels that couldn't be used for ordinary purposes because they were reserved for sacred service. That's what's been happening to you your entire life. You couldn't connect with the crowd because you were never meant to. You couldn't find satisfaction in shallow conversations because your spirit was designed for divine dialogue. You couldn't settle for ordinary relationships because your soul was wired for sacred communion. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was protection. Think about a caterpillar entering its chrysalis. From the outside, it looks like death. It looks like the end of movement, the end of progress, the end of life itself. But what's really happening inside that dark, solitary chamber? Total transformation. The caterpillar doesn't emerge from the chrysalis as a slightly improved version of itself. It emerges as something completely different, something that can do what it could never do before, something that can fly. But here's the key: that transformation could never happen in public. It requires absolute solitude, complete darkness, total isolation from everything the caterpillar used to know, because some births are too sacred for public viewing. That's what's been happening to you, beloved. Every moment of isolation, every season of loneliness, every period where you felt forgotten by the world, you weren't being abandoned. You were being transformed. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he was ready to lead. David hid in caves for years before he could wear the crown. Jesus himself withdrew from the crowds when the weight of transformation required solitude. They weren't running from their destiny. They were being prepared for it. And the preparation, it hurt. It was lonely. It felt like abandonment. It looked like failure to everyone watching from the outside. But it was the only way they could become who they were called to be. You've been asking God, why me? Why do I have to walk this path alone? Why can't I just be normal like everyone else? But what if the real question is, why was I chosen for this level of transformation? Why was I selected for this depth of calling? Why was I marked for this height of purpose? Because normal people don't change the world, beloved. Initiated ones do. The pain of your isolation wasn't random, it was strategic. Every relationship that didn't work out, every group that didn't accept you, every circle that closed before you could enter, they weren't rejecting you, they were redirecting you. Because what God is birthing in you through this process of sacred solitude is too powerful to be diluted by casual connections, too holy to be corrupted by surface-level relationships, too pure to be polluted by the opinions of people who wouldn't understand your assignment, even if you explained it to them. This is why you've never fit in. You weren't designed to. Isaiah 54:1 says, "Sing, barren woman, you who never bore a child. Burst into song, shout for joy, you who were never in labor, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband." The desolate woman, the one who appeared to have nothing, the one who seemed forgotten, overlooked, passed by. She's the one who gives birth to more than anyone expected. Your isolation wasn't barrenness, beloved. It was pregnancy. You've been carrying something in the secret places of your spirit that the world isn't ready to see yet. But the time of hiding is almost over. The chrysalis is about to crack open. The oil of anointing that's been accumulating through years of solitude is about to overflow. The preparation that felt like punishment is about to reveal itself as divine strategy. Because what emerges from sacred isolation isn't just a healed person, it's a healing presence. What comes out of divine initiation isn't just someone who survived the process, it's someone who can guide others through it. What rises from the ashes of loneliness isn't just a testimony, it's a ministry. You thought you were being excluded from the party, but God was actually preparing you to host the wedding feast. You thought you were being written out of the story, but heaven was actually training you to become the narrator. The isolation wasn't the end of your story, it was the beginning of your authority. So when the next wave of loneliness hits, when the next season of solitude begins, when the next period of feeling forgotten settles over your life, remember this: you're not being punished. You're being promoted. Say it in the comments right now: I accept the initiation. Because heaven needs your yes. The world needs what you're carrying. And what you're carrying can only be birthed in the secret place, away from the noise, beyond the reach of those who wouldn't understand the sacred nature of what's being formed inside you. The initiation is almost complete, beloved. The transformation is nearly finished. And what's about to emerge will make every moment of isolation worth it. The headaches started 3 weeks ago, didn't they? Not the kind that Tylenol can touch. The kind that feels like something inside your skull is being rewired while you sleep. The trembling in your hands when you try to pray. The sudden overwhelming need to leave rooms full of people you used to enjoy. You thought it was stress. You thought it was age. You thought it was your body breaking down. But what if that anxiety isn't mental? What if it's movement, chosen one? The ground beneath your spiritual feet is literally shifting right now. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. God is moving tectonic plates under your life, and your nervous system is the first to register the seismic activity. That racing heart when you wake up at 3 a.m., that's not panic. That's your spirit detecting frequency changes in the atmosphere. The dizzy spells when you stand too fast, that's not blood pressure. That's your soul recalibrating to operate on a higher spiritual altitude. Your body isn't failing you, it's reporting to you. You see, beloved, when God decides to shift the spiritual geography of someone's life, He doesn't send a memo first, He starts moving the foundations. And just like a house built on shifting ground, everything attached to those foundations starts to shake. Your sleep patterns, your emotional stability, your physical equilibrium, your mental clarity, everything trembles when the divine architect starts renovating. Haggai 2:6-7 warns us, "In a little while I will once more shake the heavens and the earth, the sea and the dry land. I will shake all nations, and what is desired by all nations will come." But here's what most people miss. Before God shakes the nations, He shakes His chosen ones. You're feeling the preliminary tremors, that sudden intolerance for shallow conversation. That's not you becoming antisocial. That's your spirit rejecting frequencies that no longer match your new spiritual elevation. The way certain people's voices now sound like nails on chalkboard, that's not irritability. That's divine discernment activating at a cellular level. Your spiritual GPS is being recalibrated. Think about it when tectonic plates shift beneath the ocean. What happens on the surface? Tsunamis. Massive waves that travel thousands of miles, reshaping coastlines they've never touched before. What you're experiencing right now isn't random chaos. It's the spiritual tsunami generated by God moving massive plates beneath your existence. And you're not just feeling the waves, you're riding them. The insomnia that's been plaguing you for weeks. God is keeping you awake during the hours when the spiritual realm is most active, downloading information into your consciousness that you'll need for what's coming. Those vivid, almost prophetic dreams when you do sleep, that's not your subconscious processing stress. That's heaven conducting briefings. Daniel 2:19 tells us that the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Why night? Because darkness amplifies spiritual frequencies. Your disrupted sleep isn't a disorder, it's divine scheduling. But here's what's going to shock you. Every physical symptom you've been experiencing has a spiritual diagnostic attached to it. The pressure in your chest that feels like someone's sitting on your lungs, that's not anxiety. That's your spirit expanding to accommodate a larger vision than your natural mind can currently process. The ringing in your ears that doctors can't explain, that's not tinnitus. That's the frequency of heaven trying to establish a clearer communication line with your inner ear. Your body is becoming a spiritual antenna, the sudden sensitivity to light, to sound, to crowds, to energy. You're not developing allergies, you're developing spiritual allergies, an immune response to anything that operates on the old frequency while your system upgrades to the new one. This is why you can't tolerate what you used to tolerate. Ezekiel 3:14 says, "The Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heat of my spirit." Even the prophet experienced physical and emotional turbulence when God moved him to a new spiritual location. Transition is never comfortable, but it's always necessary. That overwhelming urge to declutter your house, to cut ties with certain people, to cancel commitments you made months ago, that's not impulsiveness. That's your spirit responding to divine instructions to prepare for departure. You're being prepped for spiritual relocation. But the most telling sign of all, the way you can't seem to care about things that used to consume you, the way world events that once sent you into emotional spirals now feel distant, almost irrelevant, the way you've lost interest in defending your opinions, proving your points, or engaging in debates. That's not depression, that's detachment, divine detachment, the kind that happens when heaven starts showing you what really matters versus what you thought mattered, when you're being prepared for a mission that transcends the temporary concerns of this present world. You're not losing your mind, you're finding your purpose. The strange part, some of you are experiencing the exact opposite symptoms. Instead of anxiety, you're feeling supernatural peace in the middle of obvious chaos. Instead of insomnia, you're sleeping deeper than you have in years. Instead of sensitivity, you're feeling bulletproof, untouchable, divinely insulated. Both responses are correct. Both are evidence of the shift, because God doesn't move everyone the same way. Some are being shaken to wake them up. Others are being settled to prepare them for what's ahead. Some are being made sensitive to detect spiritual activity. Others are being made resilient to withstand spiritual warfare. The question isn't what you're experiencing. The question is whether you recognize it as divine intervention. Jeremiah 23:29 declares, "Is not my word like fire and like a hammer that breaks the rock in pieces?" Sometimes God's word comes as fire that burns away what doesn't belong. Sometimes it comes as a hammer that breaks up hardened ground, so new growth can emerge. Either way, it's not destruction, it's reconstruction. The ground is shaking because you're being moved from where you are to where you need to be. The trembling you feel isn't fear, it's your spiritual foundations adjusting to support the weight of what God is about to build on your life. You're not cracking under pressure, you're being carved into new terrain. The shaking isn't random. It's not punishment. It's not even a test. It's divine cartography. God is redrawing the map of your existence, and that requires moving mountains, shifting valleys, redirecting rivers, and yes, shaking everything that can be shaken, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. And what cannot be shaken, beloved, is your calling. If your sleep has been wild, if your spirit's been loud, if your body's been speaking a language you don't recognize, comment, "I feel the ground moving right now." Because that's not just acknowledgement. That's alignment with the seismic shift God is conducting in your life. The earthquake under your feet isn't trying to knock you down. It's trying to relocate you to higher ground. And from that higher ground, you'll finally see what all the shaking was preparing you to reach. They don't want you to know this, but every door that slammed in your face, every opportunity that slipped through your fingers, every room you weren't invited into, wasn't random rejection. It was divine encryption. You thought you were just unlucky, overlooked, passed by, while others with half your talent, half your passion, half your calling, sailed into positions you deserved. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to discover. Those people didn't see you because God blacked out your signal. You weren't being ignored. You were being hidden. Think about it, chosen one. How many times did someone who promised to help you suddenly go silent? How many connections that seemed destined to open doors mysteriously evaporated? How many platforms that should have recognized your value acted like you didn't exist? That wasn't coincidence. That was classified protocol. Heaven ran interference on your visibility because what you've become, what you're carrying, is too dangerous to be exposed to the wrong systems at the wrong time. You weren't denied access because you weren't qualified. You were denied access because the world wasn't ready for the weapon you've become. Listen carefully. In the intelligence community, when an asset becomes too valuable, too strategic, too critical to national security, what happens? They don't put them on billboards. They don't parade them through public squares. They don't announce their location to the enemy. They make them invisible. That's exactly what heaven has been doing with you. While you were crying about being overlooked, God was conducting the most sophisticated stealth operation in spiritual history. Every rejection was a redirection. Every delay was a declassification hold. Every silence was heaven's way of saying, not yet. The timing isn't lethal enough, because when you finally emerge, it won't just be an appearance, it will be an ambush. Remember, Joseph, Genesis 41 tells us that one day he was forgotten in prison, and the next day he was standing before Pharaoh interpreting dreams. No gradual climb up the ladder, no networking his way to the top. One moment invisible, the next moment indispensable. That's not a career move, that's a military operation. God kept Joseph in lockdown until the exact moment his emergence would reshape an entire civilization. Not when Joseph was ready, when the world was ripe for the disruption he carried. And that same strategy is operating in your life right now. You've been wondering why your gifts haven't been recognized, why your voice hasn't been heard, why your talents haven't been discovered. But what if I told you that recognition was the trap? What if visibility was the snare designed to neutralize you before you could reach your full potential? What if that job, that platform, that connection didn't reject you? Heaven just denied them access to protect you. Think about David. Before he became king, he spent years hiding in caves while Saul hunted him. But 1 Samuel 23:14 says something profound. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. God didn't give David into his hands. It wasn't David's skill at hiding. It wasn't luck or good strategy. God himself was scrambling the enemy's radar, making David invisible to those who meant him harm. And he's been doing the same thing for you. Every time you applied for that position and got silence, every time you reached out to that mentor and heard nothing back, every time you put yourself out there and felt invisible, that wasn't rejection. That was divine interference. Because here's what they don't teach you in church: visibility is a weapon. And like all weapons, it can be used to protect or destroy. In the wrong hands, at the wrong time, with the wrong agenda, visibility becomes a target painted on your back. But in the right hands, at the right time, with heaven's agenda, visibility becomes unstoppable force. The difference is timing, and timing, beloved, is everything. You see, the enemy has been scanning for you. Systems of control have been searching for threats to their agenda. Powers and principalities have been monitoring for anyone carrying the frequency you possess. But they couldn't find you because heaven cloaked your signature. Isaiah 49:2 says, "He made my mouth like a sharpened sword. In the shadow of his hand he hid me. He made me into a polished arrow and concealed me in his quiver." Concealed me in his quiver. You weren't shelved. You weren't forgotten. You were loaded. Positioned in heaven's weaponry, sharpened in secret, polished in private, waiting for the moment when divine timing would demand your release. And that moment is almost here. But here's the part that's going to revolutionize how you see your past. Every closed door was heaven protecting you from premature exposure. Every silent treatment was God saving your ammunition for the right battle. Every delay was divine strategy, ensuring that when you finally appear, it will be at maximum impact. Because timing isn't just about when you arrive, it's about when they least expect you. Think about Esther, hidden in the palace for years before the crisis that required her intervention. Not visible to the public, not known by the masses, just quietly positioned until the exact moment when her emergence would save an entire people. That positioning wasn't accidental, it was tactical. The very system that should have elevated you has been blinded to your presence. The platforms that should have invited you have been unable to see you. The connections that should have opened doors have been rendered incapable of recognizing what you carry. Not because you're not ready, because they're not ready for you, but the blackout is about to end. The encryption is about to be lifted. The stealth mode that's been protecting you is about to be deactivated. And when it is, your emergence won't be gradual. It will be sudden. It won't be subtle. It will be seismic. Every door that was closed to protect your timing will now swing open to fulfill your destiny. Every voice that went silent to preserve your stealth will now echo with endorsement. Every platform that couldn't see you will now compete for your presence, because the same God who made you invisible can make you undeniable. But here's the intelligence you need to understand. This transition from hidden to revealed isn't just about your success, it's about their disruption. Your emergence isn't just your elevation, it's their awakening. The systems that ignored you did so because heaven programmed them to. They were never your allies. They were always the infrastructure you were being prepared to replace. You weren't locked out of rooms because you didn't belong. You were locked out because heaven encrypted your destiny until the moment your access would reprogram the entire system. Romans 8:19 declares, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed." Revealed. Not gradually discovered. Revealed. Like a classified document being declassified. Like a stealth aircraft dropping its camouflage. Like a sleeper agent receiving activation codes. The wait is almost over. Say it boldly in the comments, "I'm not being ignored, I'm being hidden." Because that's not just a declaration, that's your acknowledgement that the blackout was never about rejection. It was about perfect timing for maximum impact. The trap of visibility was designed to snare you before you were fully loaded. But you escaped that trap by being invisible until invincible. And now you're about to find out what happens when heaven decides it's time to reveal the weapon they've been forging in secret. The world thought they knew what power looked like. They were wrong. Stop looking at your calendar. July 13th isn't ink on paper. It's not a date circled in red waiting for something to happen to you. It's a frequency, a vibration, a veil tearing in the unseen realm. And you, chosen one, are one of the few whose spiritual DNA has been coded to recognize when that veil splits open. But here's what's going to shake you. The portal isn't waiting for July 13th to appear. It's already here. It's been building, and you've been walking toward it your entire life. Think about the patterns, beloved, the way certain numbers keep appearing in your life. The way you glance at clocks at exactly 11:11, 3:33, 5:55. The way specific sequences seem to follow you through your days, your dreams, your decisions. That's not coincidence, that's calibration. Heaven has been synchronizing your internal compass with cosmic coordinates you can't see, but your spirit can sense. Every repeated number, every divine timing, every moment when you felt like the universe was speaking directly to you, those were calibration points preparing you for this exact alignment. Because portals don't open randomly, they open by divine mathematics. In Daniel 9:24, the angel Gabriel speaks of 70 weeks determined for Daniel's people, not 70 days, not 70 years, 70 weeks, a prophetic measurement that transcends human calendars and operates on heaven's timeline. God doesn't think in human time, he thinks in prophetic sequences. And July 13th, it's not just the 194th day of the year. It's the culmination of a prophetic sequence that's been counting down since the moment you first felt different, since the first time you sensed you were marked for something the world couldn't name. Every spiritual milestone in your life has been a coordinate leading to this gateway. But here's what's going to disturb you. The portal won't open for everyone. It won't respond to prayer without preparation. It won't activate for faith without frequency alignment. The gate only recognizes the hidden. This is why God has been pulling you away from crowds. This is why your spirit has been demanding solitude. This is why you've felt compelled to disconnect from systems, relationships, and patterns that once defined you. Because the portal reads spiritual signatures, not social status. When Jesus spoke of the narrow gate in Matthew 7:14, he wasn't talking about geographic dimensions. He was revealing prophetic access protocols. Small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Only a few find it, not because God is exclusive, but because only a few are willing to become invisible enough to slip through dimensions that the naked eye can't detect. This is why you've been hidden. This is why you've been prepared. The entire month of July has been heaven's countdown, and most people are treating it like summer vacation. But you feel it, don't you? That building pressure in the atmosphere. That sense that something massive is gathering momentum just beyond what you can see. That's the portal charging. Think about it. What has been shifting in your life these past few weeks? What connections have been severed without explanation? What doors have been closing with supernatural finality? What old patterns have been breaking down faster than you can rebuild them? You're not experiencing chaos. You're experiencing dimensional preparation. The portal doesn't just open in time. It opens through time. It opens through prepared vessels who've learned to exist in the space between what is and what's coming. And that space, beloved, is where you've been living. This is why your prayers feel different lately, why your worship has become more intense, more desperate, more real, why your spiritual sensitivity has spiked to levels that sometimes feel overwhelming. You're not losing your mind. You're tuning into a frequency that exists beyond this dimension. Revelation 4:1 says, "After this I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven." John didn't create that door. He didn't earn access to it. He was simply positioned to see it when it opened. And positioning, chosen one, is everything. But here's the part that's going to electrify your understanding. July 13th isn't when the portal opens. July 13th is when it reaches maximum aperture. It's been opening gradually, imperceptibly for months. Every person who's walked away from your life was actually walking away from the portal's pull. Every opportunity that dissolved was making space for what can only come through dimensional transition. Every comfort that's been stripped away was removing weight that would prevent you from moving through spiritual gates. Because you can't carry old world baggage into new realm territory. The portal operates on quantum spiritual principles that defy natural logic. It responds to frequency, not force, to alignment, not achievement, to surrender, not strategy. This is why the hidden ones get access first. When Moses encountered the burning bush in Exodus 3:2, he didn't see fire, he saw a portal, a dimensional intersection where heaven's reality intersected with earthly space. And what was the first instruction? Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Remove what connects you to the old terrain, because you're standing on holy ground that operates by different laws. That's exactly where you are right now. The ground beneath your feet isn't just earth anymore. It's holy ground, sacred space, portal territory, and everything you've been feeling, the disorientation, the spiritual sensitivity, the overwhelming sense that reality is shifting, that's your confirmation. You're standing in the aperture zone. But access requires more than proximity. It requires recognition. You have to see the gate to walk through it. You have to acknowledge the portal to activate it. This is why your spirit has been screaming at you for weeks. It's not anxiety, it's not fear, it's not even excitement, it's recognition. Your soul recognizes what your mind can't fully process, that every moment of isolation, every tear of confusion, every night of wrestling with purpose has been preparing you for a transition that will redefine not just your life, but your entire reality. The portal isn't waiting for July 13th. July 13th is waiting for you to recognize that you're already standing in its threshold. Every experience you've had, every pain you've endured, every revelation you've received has been coordinating your spiritual GPS to arrive at these exact coordinates at this exact moment in prophetic history? What if the entire month of July has been heaven's countdown and you're inside the final seconds? The portal won't open for noise. It won't respond to desperation. It won't activate for those still trying to hold on to the old while reaching for the new. It opens to silence, to stillness, to readiness. It opens to those who've learned to exist in the space between worlds, who've been hidden long enough to forget the fear of being seen, who've been prepared long enough to trust the process even when the destination is invisible. If you feel like something massive is building, if you sense that every day is bringing you closer to a threshold you can't name but can't ignore, comment, "I see the gate right now," because that's not just recognition, that's activation. The portal has been waiting for you to arrive. And beloved, you're closer than you think. Chosen one, as we come to the end of this sacred revelation, I need you to remember 3 things that will anchor your soul in the days ahead. First, that strange stillness you felt wasn't abandonment, it was assignment. Every moment of isolation, every door that closed, every relationship that faded wasn't rejection. It was heaven's strategic positioning, preparing you for a calling that requires complete spiritual stealth. Second, the shaking in your life, the physical symptoms, the emotional turbulence, the ground shifting beneath your feet. That wasn't breakdown. That was divine realignment. God is moving tectonic plates under your existence, not to destroy what you've built, but to relocate you to higher ground, where your true purpose can finally emerge. And third, July 13th isn't just a date on your calendar. It's a portal, a dimensional gateway that you've been walking toward your entire life. Every pattern, every sequence, every moment of divine timing has been calibrating your spirit for this exact alignment. You are not alone in this journey, beloved. While the world may not understand the transformation you're undergoing, heaven is intimately involved in every detail of your process. The same God who has carried you through every valley, who has sustained you, through every storm, who has hidden you in the shadow of his wings. During seasons of preparation, he is still working, still moving, still orchestrating every element of your destiny. And there is a community here, thousands of chosen ones who understand your struggle, who feel the same spiritual tremors, who recognize the signs because they're experiencing them too. You are part of something larger than yourself, a remnant being prepared for a time such as this. So let me ask you this, knowing what you now know, sensing what your spirit has been trying to tell you, feeling the portal opening around your life, are you ready to trust the process, even when you can't see the destination? Are you ready to embrace the hiding as sacred preparation rather than painful punishment? Let us pray together. Heavenly Father, I place my hand on the shoulder of every chosen one, listening to this message right now. Lord, they have walked through valleys that others couldn't understand. They have carried burdens that seem too heavy for their shoulders. They have questioned their worth, their calling, their very existence during seasons of profound isolation and confusion. But you, Lord, you have never left them, even in their darkest moments, even when they felt forgotten by the world. You were there, shaping them, molding them, preparing them for this very hour. I pray now for supernatural peace to flood their hearts. Let them feel your presence in ways that transcend human understanding. Remove every trace of anxiety about the future and replace it with unshakable confidence in your perfect timing. Lord, bless their minds with clarity to discern your voice above all the noise. Bless their bodies with strength to endure the transformation process. Bless their relationships, protect the ones you've ordained, and release them from the ones that no longer serve your purpose. Open doors that no man can shut. Provide resources they haven't even thought to ask for. Surround them with divine favor and supernatural protection. Let every step they take be ordered by you. Every word they speak carry your authority. Every breath they breathe be filled with your purpose. And Lord, as July 13th approaches, as this portal fully opens, give them the courage to step through. Not in fear, but in faith. Not in uncertainty, but in complete trust that you who began this good work in them will carry it on to completion. Cover them now with your peace that surpasses all understanding. Let them sleep tonight knowing they are seen, known, loved, and strategically positioned for breakthrough. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. If this message has touched your heart, if you recognize yourself in these words, I want you to know that you're not just watching a video, you're part of a movement. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what God is stirring in your spirit. Ask your questions. This community is here to pray with you, to stand with you, to remind you that you are not alone. And please share this message with someone who needs to hear it. There are other chosen ones out there who feel isolated, who think they're losing their minds, who believe they've been forgotten. Help them find their way to this truth. Help them understand that their hiding is holy, their waiting is purposeful, and their emergence is imminent. Thank you for staying with this message from beginning to end. Thank you for having the courage to hear what your spirit has been trying to tell you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and turn